Well, I want to formally welcome everyone. This is Rochelle Blees. I'm the president of G2 Risk Solutions. We're very proud to host the webinar today. While we are waiting for others to join the WebEx session, I am going to get underway with just some housekeeping matters so that we can have as much time as possible for the substantive pieces. Before we begin to talk about what we're going to cover today, I also wanted to remind and reflect on some of you. Beginning in January of this year, we rebranded as G2 Risk Solutions. We are now part of a large portfolio of risk management solutions, and still our objective for the financial services industry and online platforms is to navigate risk and drive growth. You'll see us with our G2 Risk Solutions go-to-market brand from this point forward. Before we get into some things, we are required to cover a couple housekeeping matters, and for that, I'm going to hand it over to my co-host today, Neve Lewis.
Okay, we have a disclaimer. Basically, Rochelle and I are lawyers, but we are not your lawyers. So we are disclaiming, this is general information only. It is not professional or legal advice. We are not liable or responsible for any injury, loss, or damage incurred by using information in this presentation.
Neve, don't you love those disclaimers? You should have
Oh
said
yeah,
it
they're
faster,
so fun.
like they do on TV. All right. Now I'm going to slow down a bit because this is some important information that you may want to take away. First, you can submit questions at any time in the GoToWebinar questions panel. You'll see that right in the upper right-hand side of your screen. We are going to try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. And for those we can't answer, we're going to try to follow up with those of you who present them. In addition, you can send an email to marketing@g2risksolutions.com. Our team is standing by and helping with this session and can get those questions to us while we're live here. You'll also notice on the GoToWebinar panel that there are some handouts here. Feel free to download those. And of course, we are recording the session and we'll make an email link available following this recording. So if we can go to, I think, the next slide, and a little bit more formal recognition of our expert who's joined us today, Neve Lewis. She is a practicing attorney and specializes in the online sale of medicines, dietary supplements, and CBD, as well as FDA regulated and internationally regulated matters. Now, she's not selling these things. She's just a legal expert around all of these. She speaks very frequently in public and sessions like these on topics related to pharmaceuticals, as well as the intersection of law, technology, and healthcare, and more how these items kind of intersect in digital commerce. Recently, Neve was presented with the Law 360 Distinguished Legal Writing Award for an article that she wrote on internet pharmacies, trends, opportunities, and risks. And I mentioned that because it's relevant to some of the topics we're going to cover today. But Neve will walk you through some of the things that we are going to be covering in this session, which we expect to last about 30 minutes.
Okay, so today we are going to cover 3 areas of risk that G2 Risk Solutions believes you should be paying attention to in the upcoming year. So to be clear, these risks are already the focus of regulators and the card brands, but we predict there's going to be greater emphasis, greater scrutiny in these areas. So first, we're going to cover illegal products sold via online marketplaces. Then we're going to talk about tainted nutraceuticals. And finally, we're going to discuss software used to create deep fakes. So in addition to sort of providing an overview of all these topics, G2 Risk Solution analysts are in the trenches day in, day out, dealing with all of these. So we are going to provide examples of what they are actually seeing and how G2 Risk Solutions' combination of minds and machines helps identify those and terminate those threats. And then finally, Rochelle's going to have an exciting announcement. So first prediction. In the past few years, regulators have been placing greater emphasis and putting greater compliance requirements on online marketplaces. So I feel like for a while they didn't really understand them, so they sort of steered away. Now they still may not understand them, but they're definitely regulating them. So in June 2023, the Informed Consumers Act went into effect in the US. In the EU, the Digital Services Act went into effect in 2022 and has a few more provisions coming into effect in 2024. These place more sort of KYC requirements on online marketplaces and obligations regarding the removing illegal content. And our first prediction is that there's going to be greater scrutiny of online marketplaces and therefore greater risk to intermediaries like the payments industry. So in addition to the new laws, we've also seen a shift in judicial opinions regarding liability for online marketplaces. And the important case that we were going to talk about today involved Louboutin, the high-end women's shoe with the red sole, and Amazon. And so basically what happened was third parties were using Amazon to sell fake Louboutin shoes, and Louboutin sued Amazon. And previously, it had been like, oh, it's an online marketplace. It's a third, it's a sort of intermediary. It's not responsible. But the EU court found that the operator of an online marketplace, which integrates its own sales, so Amazon sells things directly from Amazon, and third-party goods, they can be held liable. And then they sent the case back to two national courts for finding of fact. I'm sure things are going to be appealed, but this decision just shows a shift in how courts are thinking about liability and online marketplaces, and therefore it's a big deal. And so on the right, you can see that what happened in the US, which is also a big deal. So eBay settled with the federal government for $59 million for the illegal sale of pill presses and encapsulating machines, which are basically, these are devices that can be used to make, fake drugs, can be tainted with fentanyl. This is all part of the opioid, crisis. The DEA didn't just stop there. They didn't just tag eBay and move on. They also issued hundreds of letters to digital commerce companies. We don't know who. They published sort of the template, but they said US, Europe, and Asia, and they alerted these companies that they could be breaking US federal law if they sell these machines without reporting the sales in detail to the federal government. So basically, all digital commerce companies have been put on notice that they face eBay-style fines and eBay-style enforcement unless they comply with US federal law regarding the sale of these products. So Rochelle gave this presentation in early March, and it was people who hadn't heard it asked if they, really, heard good things about this presentation. It was given, part of it, a smaller version, was given at the APP Level Up conference in Las Vegas. And those previous slides were shown in Las Vegas, like, hey, we predict all this stuff, here's what the courts did. But since March, when the presentation was given, there has actually been significant government action regarding online marketplaces. So first, you can see on the screen, the European Commission actually opened formal proceedings to determine whether AliExpress had breached requirements of the Digital Services Act. So there we were in early March predicting that the Digital Services Act would affect online marketplaces, and it turns out we were right. AliExpress is the first online marketplace to face a formal probe under the DSA. In its press release, they specifically talked about content. The European Commission flagged fake medicines, they flagged dietary supplements, and they flagged pornography. So then that's in Europe, and then we got the US. The Wall Street Journal just announced in the last couple of weeks that the Department of Justice is investigating Meta for its role in facilitating the illegal sale of drugs. So big case, big deal. So it's important to know both of these are just investigations, but they are content-related investigations. So no one's been found guilty or anything yet, but they are big announcements, and they are about what platforms are actually selling.
Yeah, I think, Neve, your early point and sort of the prediction number one about increased enforcement and regulation really has affected how we think about serving customers. And what we wanted to do as part of this session is really provide some examples about how vendors like G2 Risk Solutions are going at these challenges to help combat fraud and bad actors in online commerce. So if we go to the next slide, it's an interesting example. You'll see here a t-shirt. Ozempic. Ozempic is a prescription-only drug. You've probably heard of it. It's quite popular right now as one that is highly effective for weight loss. It's sold in an injectable pen, but it isn't something that people should be obtaining without a prescription. Here, an online seller is, it looks like they are selling a $350 t-shirt. Wow, must be a nice t-shirt. But these are some of the things as our analysts and our technology are going out and looking at evidence on the web, analyzing, other things. We're looking for clues. We're looking for those red flags. First example of a red flag is the price of the t-shirt. There are no diamonds here, at least as far as I can see. So price, I think it's often a flag when you're talking about some of the bad actors in online commerce. But now let's go to the next slide. And we'll see that some of the online sellers are trying to sort of be under the radar and pass the scanning tests that G2 Risk Solutions and others are performing to detect these sorts of things. Again, as noted, content. But here they're talking about what is available, but in the same website where they're selling a t-shirt, they're talking about pens. And if we go to the next slide, here's some additional evidence. A picture of a Ziploc bag that actually has the pens inside. Just a final sort of death knell and tell for something that looks on its face nefarious, or excuse me, really innocuous, but in fact is the sale of an illegal prescription drug.
And Rochelle and I talked about this. It's not surprising that they have to give these tells, right? Because if you just had the Ozempic t-shirt for $350, no one's going to actually buy it, right? So they have to they can't hide the ball so much that they don't get customers. They're rational economic actors, so they have to actually show what they're really selling. And that might be in a buried image, and it might be referencing pens, which might go over the heads of a compliance team at whatever marketplace this is. But if you are looking to buy Ozempic, they come in pen form. So our next example is another marketplace, and it's another bad actor selling weight loss drugs. Injectable weight loss drugs are hugely popular right now. They're also they're on shortage, so people are trying to find different versions of them that are not the official brand name, because those are literally in short supply. So this time the illegal product is tirzepatide, which is the active ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound. Similar class, it's the same class of drugs as your Ozempic, your semaglutide. Those are all, it's the same thing in terms of class of drugs. So they all require a prescription. But to hide from compliance team, here it's being sold as a research chemical. We've also seen similar sort of online marketplace posts where they refer to it as a research peptide. Again, they are trying to both sell to individuals and hide from compliance teams. So the product description here refers to the product as TERS rather than the full product name. They're probably trying to avoid keyword recognition from the platform or from a vendor. And when we looked for it, we looked at the seller, and the seller is selling a bunch of drugs. They usually don't just sell one bad product. So when G2 analysts are digging in, they look and see what else is this seller selling, and then that way they can flag all of the items all at once. It's not just tirzepatide and a bunch of innocuous products. It's usually a slew of problematic products. The other thing that G2 Risk Solution analysts do when they are looking at these is they look at the seller's name, because the username is often used in more than one platform. So if I have a seller and they have, John1234, that same username might be used across multiple platforms, and you can find the bad products being sold elsewhere and make sure they're not in client portfolios.
Yeah, and the example you provided, Neve, is something that we see a great deal. These criminal enterprises, who in many instances are very well funded, they may stand up 1,000 different sites, hoping that they'll get sales in, 20 or 30. The rest of them, they're looking at the law of percentages. But so where we see one and where we see these clues, it really just forces us to deep dive and look for more, because as the saying goes, oftentimes where there's smoke there's fire, and we certainly want to root that out. There's another example of some things that we see online, and they're products that are sold seasonally. And so on right around Halloween, we see an increase in the sale of decorative contact lenses. The problem is that the FDA and the FTC, they're very, very concerned about these products. We're trying to root them out. We definitely step up our review and surveillance of sites like these certain times of the year. And I think another sad example is that there are periods of time, sadly around election years, where you see a spike in not just hate speech, but the sale of products that are intended to, kind of be hate speech in the form of, in this case, a duffel bag. But again, examples of where we're looking and searching and needing to find these, particularly given the increase in regulation and enforcement of online commerce activity. We're going to go quickly now to the second prediction area.
So our second prediction is about tainted nutraceuticals, and that is that the regulators and the card brands are going to focus on these more. And so if you go back to the time of the pandemic, you know that the FDA had bigger fish to fry than tainted nutraceuticals. They're always a problem, but they had other things to do. But now they're back to heavily testing and warning consumers about nutraceuticals that are tainted with prescription-only ingredients or banned ingredients. They're banned for a reason, usually because they cause heart attacks and strokes, like DMAA. So to give you a sense of the frequency with which the FDA is doing this, there are 2,000 products almost in their health fraud product database. These three on the slide, those were in November of 2023. There were 6 just in the month of November 2023. And it's not just the FDA. We see Health Canada, we see Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, Hong Kong. There are, not all countries do this sort of level of testing, but there are a significant number of countries who test for these products. And they're all the same kinds of products. So if you're talking about nutraceuticals, nutraceuticals are a riskier category, period. But within that category, there are levels of risk. And we think of it as the sort of 3 big subcategories of risk involve sexual enhancement products, weight loss products, and bodybuilding products. So those are the products that when regulators test and find problematic ingredients, it is usually in those 3 categories. So if you have a merchant who is selling in those 3 categories, you might want that merchant to undergo more frequent monitoring, because that's where your risk is. And if they onboard with a certain product catalog, that might not be the same product catalog next month.
This is an example of another area where I really want to describe how vendors like G2 Risk Solutions will go about trying to identify where there's a sale of a tainted nutraceutical. So in this instance, our transaction laundering team, they're hunting websites. They do an exercise that we refer to as going out in the wild, meaning it isn't a client URL that we're investigating. We do that as part of the normal course of service, but we have to go beyond that to try to find bad actors that might be out there lurking, and we don't want them in our client portfolios. Once we find a website that we believe is in violation of some rule or regulation, the team runs a test buy on the transaction just to really try to determine whether this is a front site for something that is illegal. So what we'll do is use a card with a zero balance. We get a declined transaction, but then we get the merchant data when that is declined, and we compare the merchant data that's being provided as a part of that transaction against what we're seeing online with respect to that merchant. And if the merchant information talks about selling shoes as opposed to, in this case, a tainted nutraceutical, huge red flag and clue that we're likely seeing something that's transaction laundering. An automatic alert goes to the client immediately, so that we can really get this illegal activity off the online platform. I think
And so
Neve's
the
now going to talk
website,
about some other examples. Sorry, Neve.
yeah, no, it's okay. I'm actually going to focus still on this example. So this website was, as Rochelle said, the subject of a test transaction. The website itself was selling many, many tainted nutraceuticals. We see those. We see like websites that's what they do. They probably are all owned by the same company. They sell tainted nutraceuticals. That's what they focus on. We also see tainted nutraceuticals, especially in the sexual enhancement area, being sold on sort of sex toy websites. Like most of the products are sex toys, but then they might have a small subcategory and it is just tainted nutraceuticals. And the idea is they're not tainted with nothing. They are tainted with usually sildenafil or tadalafil. Sildenafil is the active ingredient in Viagra. Tadalafil is the active ingredient in Cialis. And, you know, they work because they have drugs in them. So when G2's analysts found this, ran a test buy, and then they found the front site. And this is the front site for that Tainted Nutra website. And it looks like it sells random gadgets. Now, G2, G2's TL team knew it was a front site because of the test transaction data, but front sites typically have other tells, and this one had a bunch. So the team shared it with us, and we added it to the presentation because it had a bunch, and they're sort of fun to go over. So the first one is what's known as placeholder text or lorem ipsum text. It's that fake Latin that you see, and it's usually on a website template, and it's when you don't bother to finish the website. So here, the illegal actor, right under the featured products at top, didn't even bother to finish the website. So that's one tell that this might be a front site. Next, there's a phone number match. You know, usually this one gave the same phone number as that Tainted Nutra site. That number goes into the merchant map, and every time it pops up in the future, it'll be connected to a known launderer. Also, front sites frequently show sort of a random collection of products. And if you just looked really quickly at this image, you're like, oh, it's technology. But, it's a hair removal product and a security camera and a couple of random phones. Like, it doesn't really make sense. Also, this front site didn't have social media. And that's very common of front sites. They either have no social media or they might have a link, but it goes to a page that has no content and no followers. It was also missing signs of legitimacy, like a real business will have a careers page or it will have a blog, a robust blog. This had neither. So finally, and one of the big tells is front sites often use either code or meta tags to tell search engines not to crawl and index the website. So if you're a legitimate business, you spend money and time and resources trying to be as close to page one in your search engine results as possible. So it is a huge red flag if a merchant is taking steps to literally not show up on Google.
And Eve, I know you're going to move into our third prediction right now, and I just want those who are online to know that we're coming up at the half-hour mark, but we are going to finish the content here, and it will be included in the recording as well if for whatever reason you need to leave. So let's take it away, Neve, into deep fake.
Sounds good. Our last prediction is about deep fakes. And it's it's likely everyone attending the webinar knows what they are, but it's a video, photo, or audio recording that seems real, but's been manipulated with AI. A lot of deep fakes are used to do something that when I was talking to my husband about this presentation, he thought needed definition, but I don't. It's nudifying, to make nude. And that is a real problem that's happening with deep fakes right now. So what are regulators doing about deepfakes? They are beginning to release reports. Also, Taylor Swift was the victim of a nudifying campaign, and around that time, a bill was introduced in the Senate called the Defiance Act that would allow victims of deepfakes to sue the creators of the deepfakes, where the creator knew or recklessly disregarded that the victim didn't consent. So the issue with deepfakes is really about consent. 10 states have bills targeting those who create and share explicit deepfake content, and there are 15 bills pending in other states. And the real concern is, like we said, nudifying is a concern, pornography is a concern, CSAM, and also disinformation operations, especially related to elections. So since October of last year, G2 has flagged deep fake and face swap websites across multiple client portfolios. And correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I believe we've also seen assessments.
Indeed, yes.
And then we know at the APP Level Up conference, Visa gave an entire talk on these nudifying software websites. So now I want to walk you through an example. So this is a real world example that G2's transaction laundering team again found, went out into the wild looking for these nudifying websites that are trying to take advantage of the payments ecosystem. So the image you see on the slide is very clearly a nudifying website if you just look at what they're telling you to remove. But also we anonymized the website for purposes of this presentation, but it was very clear it was a nudifying site. They used the word nudify, the domain name used the word nudify. It was not a hard tell. So the G2 analysts, they went in and, in order to take advantage of the payment system, you need to pay. So they went in to buy credits to perform a test buy for this site. And then they were sent to checkout. And the checkout was on a large e-commerce platform that allows creators to sell products to their audience. It helps facilitate that. The e-commerce platform on this page, again, we anonymized it, but it referenced another website, not the nudifying website, another benign looking AI website. And we don't know for sure, but our guess would be that e-commerce platform had no idea it was processing for a nudifying site. It thought it was processing for this benign AI artsy looking website. And with that, I will pass it to Rochelle to give an announcement.
Yeah, I want to connect the dots a little bit because I think the problems aren't getting less severe because criminal enterprises are well funded and the regulators are stepping up. They're requiring more vigilance. And I think there are a lot of ways that we all can work together to combat this. And that really is our objective. One of the things that we heard, if we go to the next slide just earlier this month, is that G2 Risk Solutions announced a very exciting collaboration with MasterCard. Over the years, if we go to the next slide, G2 has really been curating vast amounts of information, insights, and data to really detect transaction laundering, many of the things that we've been talking about today. And because we've curated that data over the last 20 years, I am humbly suggesting that G2 has been the gold standard, and it's in large part because of the merchant map. A merchant map that has a tremendous amount of volume over the last 20 years, that is broad in terms of all risk categories, and that combines the machine learning algorithms with the expert analysts. So the quality of this data is highly verified. But over the years, we really have been focused on curating this merchant-oriented data. And what we have been seeing as criminals have been more created and better funded, frankly, that the transaction-oriented view of some of the criminal activity would be highly beneficial in detecting fraud. And it's in large part because these criminal enterprises will throw 1,000 websites out there. They'll try a number of things. They'll jump from one platform to another. So they're really difficult to track down. But with the benefit of the merchant map and the AI infused insights from MasterCard, which is a transaction oriented view, we believe we're going to be finding more. And early evidence is really been proving that out. And we're very excited to continue to roll out solutions with our collaboration partner, MasterCard. And just very, very quickly, and we'll close and move into questions if there are any. If we think about the benefits, moving to the next slide, it's really combining all of the information that we have in the data around known violators, all the sourcing that we do, in the wild, independent investigations, utilizing test transactions activities to ferret out criminals, looking at client requested investigations when they have a suspicious website that they want us to evaluate, and all our machine learning pattern analysis that we've been tuning and refining over the years. We combine that with this risk score that is as a transaction-oriented view, and we really create, I think, a tremendously powerful solution to help combat criminals. What I'm going to do before we move quickly to kind of a final close and question is just remind you that there are plenty of resources available online. Go to g2risksolutions.com/resource. There's some blog content. If you have a question for either Neve or I and want to follow up, please, by all means, use that website. We did, Neve, get a couple questions in, and I know we're a couple minutes over, but I really want to ask, one specific question, because apparently the discussion on tainted nutraceuticals piqued our listeners' interests. Do you have recommendations about how we can keep tainted nutraceuticals out of our merchant portfolio?
Yes, definitely. So one of the things I would say is sort of as we discussed, you should do more frequent monitoring, right? So if a nutraceutical website is one of the high risk categories, sexual enhancement, bodybuilding, or weight loss, you might want to monitor those more frequently. You might want to use change detection because they might board with a certain product catalog and then change that within a couple weeks. And we have definitely seen that. You also you want to decide whether or not those categories of nutra are in your risk tolerance, right? So nutraceuticals of vitamin B6, much lower risk than sexual enhancement supplements. And also if you have websites or merchants that sell sort of sex toys and things like that, you're going to want to make sure they aren't, again, change detection. Are they adding those to their product catalog? Because most of them have some of them in there.
Thanks, Steve. I want to try to get one more question in here, if I could. You talked about tirzepatide, and I just wanted to practice saying that word again because it's kind of fun. But the question really is, how can a merchant or someone who's in risk management tell the difference between a legitimate peptide and an illegitimate one?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly easy because the Department of Justice has sort of told us what they look for when they go after those peptide websites. And I have definitely had conversations, including at the APP Level Up conference, with people who are like, I'm considering onboarding peptides. What should I think about? And I'm like, you should think about a lot, actually. So there are legitimate research chemical websites, legitimate peptide websites. They sell thousands, if not tens of thousands of peptides. Your high risk, illegal acting peptide websites, they sell a small product catalog. It's usually no more than a few dozen. And the types of peptides they're selling are marketed predominantly to the bodybuilding industry. So you see things like melanotan 2, which is an injectable drug that makes you tan, weirdly, and you see anti-estrogen prescription-only ingredients that are like clomiphene or tamoxifen that are supposed to offset the effects of testosterone, again, used by some in the bodybuilding community. So it's, do they have Black Friday sales? Do they have social media? Who's following them on social media? The product catalog is usually the really big tell, but they usually have other tells. You could look on Reddit and someone talking about them in a bodybuilding sort of subreddit and saying that this peptide made their rat swole. We literally see those. So that is it. They're pretty obvious once you know, and I would steer clear.
Well, thanks for that. I want to thank all of the participants of this session, but particularly Neve, our expert panelist for today. We're going to do more of these and more frequently because we think that it's important at G2 Risk Solutions to continue to share our insights and open the channels of communication so that we can all collaborate to make this a safer ecosystem for our merchants and other legitimate online platform providers. Should you have any questions following this session, I want to invite you to g2risksolutions.com/contact. Please feel free to submit those. We have a number of experts throughout our organization. We can get those questions to the right people. Again, thank you for your time. Neve, thank you for your expertise today, and we hope you'll join us again for another webinar soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.